Good point. Thank you. It's a good start to the meeting, you know? All right. Yeah. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee on November 13th, 2019, in the Triton High School Library at 7 p.m.
David is ready.
David's ready. Thank you, David. Hang on a second. I have to read the vision statement first.
We don't pause a lot in our office for the pledge. This is a big deal for me.
I'll tell you what, Dave, you can lead it. How does that sound? All right. Hang on a minute, though. I'm going to read aloud the district vision statement. We're a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families in the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners, students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. This meeting is being audio and video recorded, and now Special Education Director David McGee is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. McGee. Hey, you know, I like to share the joy now and then. All right. We're going to shift things around just a little bit. So I'm going to move Chairperson's remarks down a couple of slots, and we're going to go to oral communications from the public. And seeing none, we will move on to the Student of the Month. I understand that Ms. Dempsey is here and will read aloud her nomination. If you can use the microphone that's right here in the middle. I sure will. Thank you. You guys hear me on this? Yeah. It might not be on.
There we go. Okay. I have watched Ryan Latte grow both as a student and as a member of the Triton High School community over the past 2 years. When Ryan entered my class as a junior, he faced struggles with writing, confidence, and motivation to complete his assignments. He often felt defeated in the face of these obstacles, and sometimes that brought him down. Through a great deal of hard work, risk, and a building of trust, he became one of the top students in my English class during his junior year. Concepts did not always come easy to him, but he willingly accepted help and came to understand his own accountability for his education. I have already seen a drastic positive change and increase in effort in class for this year, his senior year, and he has become a leader in our classroom. He knows the expectation, thrives in routine, and leads by example. In addition to juggling academics, Ryan works 15 to 20 hours a week at the Seabrook Market Basket. He takes pride in making his own money, something that gives him more independence. I cannot wait to see the strides Ryan makes academically and personally during his final chapter at Triton High School. Congratulations, Ryan, on District Student of the Month, an honor well deserved. Yeah, let's get a pic. Yes, Mom and Dad first. Sisters,
So now that we've had the best part of the school committee meeting, we can move along. Oh, they're going to do a few more pictures back there. I'll let them. It's awesome that he has such a cheering section.
Full and riveting meeting if you want.
Absolutely. Thank you. Congratulations, Ryan. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yep. Okay. All right, I can do that. Okay, so now that we've had the happy part, now we have to have the sad part of our meeting. I'm really sorry. I know, I feel like it's a soap opera. We're just gonna, it's gonna be the roller coaster all night long. I know. Well, and we're twice as sad as we are happy, so we're all happy for Ryan, but we have to be sad because this is the last meeting for not one, but two of our staff members that have been faithful partners to the school committee through many long years. Oh, Patty. I was going to remember tissues, and that's the one thing I forgot, too. So first of all, to Michelle, who is moving on to Marblehead. Don't cry, please, because I need to make it through you and Patty, okay? Who's moving?
I'm emotional, I'm not retired.
Okay, that's true. That's true. You're not retiring. Who's moving on to? Sorry, Brian.
Awesome. Wait, everyone's leaving me.
There's a theme here, isn't there?
Let's just keep it moving.
Okay, all right. So to Michelle, who's moving on to Marblehead at the end of the month and will become their steadfast and erstwhile school business official over there. It's been a pleasure over 3 years to serve with you here. I mean, I don't think we would have made the progress that we've made without you. So, so thank you for your time here. Oh, gosh. Do I have?
Get up and hug her and cry. Yeah.
There you go. Yes, good luck.
Okay, Patty, it's your turn now.
You want a microphone, Patty?
And Patty, I understand that you made every single person in central office, or at least Brian, promise that they would not honor you publicly, but you overlooked me. I think that was a fatal flaw. Just saying. So you've been here how long? 26 years, a phenomenal 26 years in the district. I have to say, every time I come around that corner and Patty is smiling up at me, ready to greet me, and whatever it is that happens to roll her direction, she takes it on and just does it above and beyond anything we could ever ask for. You are the heart and soul of central office. Sorry, Brian, I know you think you are, but. Roast for you, toast for Patty. So thank you, Patty, for all your time here.
Thank you. They're wonderful.
Oh, you sure? Yes. You want to say a few words? No. Thank a little bit. There you go. Oh, thank you, Patty. And our December school committee meeting will be very, very different
Yes.
after all that.
We have it on the record that I had no part of that. Right?
No part. No part.
Whatsoever.
No part.
Thank you.
That was 100% me. Yeah, so that's the bulk of my chairperson's comments. Just a reminder, too, I've heard from roughly half the committee on what their preferences would be for school tour dates and times. If you haven't gotten back to me and that's something you want to do, please let me know dates and times so that we can get those scheduled. All right, and moving on, we can get on with the boring part of the school committee agenda now. Moving on to the consent agenda. I will read aloud the donations. We have a check in the amount of $13,800 from the Salisbury Elementary School PTA for a 3-year lease on 14 iPads and 25 Chromebooks to implement technology within the ELA block in grade 1 at Salisbury Elementary School. A check in the amount of $100 from the Triton Music Parents Organization to be used toward the purchase of microphones for the Visual and Performing Arts Department. A check in the amount of $500 from the Circle Insurance Agency in Salisbury to be used toward funding Triton High School girls, the Triton High School girls soccer program. A check in the amount of $2,000 from Danielle Phillips to purchase a laptop computer, tool chest, kits, and parts for the Triton High School robotics team. Thank you for those donations. Could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I'll
I make
second.
motion.
I think Paul made
So
the motion.
we've got a motion from Paul,
I
second from Maureen.
yeah.
All right. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? You've got a unanimous vote. And, there we are. Okay, student advisory report, we don't have Kaylee.
We don't, and we don't have a report,
Okay,
so.
all right, so moving right along. New business. Oh, two. Deb's going to go first, because I knew she had new
We
business.
rehearsed, yeah. Last Thursday, I went to the 25th anniversary celebration for the Pettingill House in Salisbury. It was held at Blue Ocean up in Seaglass. It was a wonderful event. It's been 25 years since that organization was founded. It's the largest social services social services facility in the area. And the reason I bring it up is because I was sitting at the founders table. They honored the founders of that, and these are people that they designated as founders. And the reason it's relevant to this group is because one of the founder groups was the school, was Salisbury Elementary School in the Triton School District. And they honored Kathy Willis, who was the principal at the time, and Sue Foley, who was the school nurse at the time, as being instrumental in making the program get started and keeping it going, and a lot of hard work. And they recognized a couple of other groups also. But I just wanted to mention it because it just was maybe the beginning of when we really started to get involved in the community and became aware of that. But it's been 25 years, and it should still be at the forefront that what we do as a school district with our communities really resonates and benefits all the students in the school district. So it was great to see, and Kim was there too. But it was a wonderful event, and the school district was well represented.
Excellent. Maureen?
Well, I have an item that I'd like to suggest maybe we discuss at a future meeting. I don't know if you all have had a chance to read the paper, the student paper, but this article on the parking fees really struck me. And I don't know if anybody knows this, but we have some of the most expensive parking fees around. I didn't realize this, that some of the other districts their students are paying $30, $50, and our students are paying $180. So what struck me was that the students have to pay $180. Most students are paying that on their own. If they can't pay the $180, they're only paying $1 a day, which if they pay the $1 a day means that they can't participate in that most recent fundraiser that we approved, which was painting their parking spaces. So I just would like to suggest that, as we go into the budget season, that maybe we take a look at parking fees again. I know it's something we've discussed probably every year since I've been on this committee, and just to see if there's a way to either reduce them or make it so they can pay them quarterly, or just something to make it a little bit easier on our students, because I do know, having a high school student myself, that these kids are actually paying this money themselves. Their parents aren't paying their $180, so it's a lot of money for a kid. So just wanted to bring that up.
All right. So I'd suggest we parking lot that until
Yes.
budget season?
Yep.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to mention it now because I saw the article, and
P&A actually discussed it earlier as well, so it's definitely, it's made the rounds tonight.
okay. Well, this article, somebody should tell Julia Casaletto that her article has really hit home with the school committee, so.
All right. Moving on to item 9, reports and deliberations. The MASC, MASS Joint Conference. Linda, Brian, and I attended the joint conference Wednesday through, technically it went through Saturday, but I think we all left on Friday because that's when most of the big sessions tend to wrap up. Last week, it was, I think it was well-attended, probably as well-attended as I've seen it in past years. Pretty wide variety of different topics. I think all of us kind of had our highlights that we had during the conference. I have actually taken and posted on the Google Drive one folder for the MASC, MASS 2019 conference, and inside there are all of the session folders that they actually had presentations for or documentation for. Not all of them had presentations or documentation. There were, obviously, I think, 5 sessions a day, plus one general session, plus usually a networking lunch. The 3 for me that stood out, and definitely a timely one for us, I went to when to and how to review your regional agreement, which I took, a lot of it was what we had already been through, but I took some definite takeaways from that. I immediately dashed off an email to Christine Lynch when I got home at DESE, because one of the things that I found out from that session was apparently there was a period of time in the early 2000s where districts weren't actually having the commissioner sign off on their regional agreement, and they need to have a signed copy at DESE for you to be able to technically move forward with that. So I want to make sure that they have our 2006 version on file before we move forward with our discussions on the regional agreement. So, as always, there's some of those immediately actionable things. I went to a municipal district relations session, which I was actually kind of surprised at because I was expecting to pick up, I guess, some big tips from that. And what I actually got was that most districts, whether they're municipal with a city council or whatever their makeup is, regional districts, most of them do one budget summit. That's a joint meeting of all of their towns, select boards, finance committees, and school committees, and that's it for their meetings during the year as far as that set of groups. So it was actually nice to have the discussion at the end and say, it's called in our regional agreement for us to do this quarterly, but we essentially do it monthly throughout the entire school year. And a lot of people were, there's a lot of discussion about building relationships and having familiar faces when that time comes, because it's very hard to be moving into those difficult budget discussions and have essentially strangers getting together in a room to have those discussions. So a lot of people were saying, wow, yeah, meeting throughout the school year does make a lot of sense. So I don't know if we may have started a trend there, even though that was not the intention of the group. And the last one that I went to that I think really hit home for me was actually designed to be around professional development and connecting with students. It was about diversity and equity, but I thought it was really interesting. They started the session with an exercise where they gave you a wheel, and you filled in the wheel, and the wheel had spokes like religion, so you'd write down your religion, your ethnicity, your race, your whether you were middle class, upper class, whatever it happened to be, your, I'm trying to think, gender, your sexual orientation, all of these other things. And then you had to pick your top 2 that you thought influenced your decisions most, and the 2 that probably didn't matter to you so much, and the 2 that you, or the one that you really felt was kind of starting to shift in your life, because part of their thing was that, you're constantly changing those things that really influence your decisions. And then you actually had kind of a conversation with the people around you, and it was really interesting because their top 2 you wouldn't necessarily have thought of. And his whole concept behind a lot of this was there are things like religion that are unseen, there are things like race that are seen, that are motivating everyone in their decisions and their discussions. And you have to not only think of what's motivating your own decisions, but what could be motivating the person on the other side, and how that kind of works with all the interplay in between teachers and students. Yeah, I mean, I think it can apply between school committee, it can be applied between almost everybody. So it was a really interesting one, and then it kind of went off from there. But I thought it was a great session. So I don't know if Linda has anything she wants to add as far as we tried to split up so that we were doing different sessions, getting the most bang for our buck, so to speak.
Well, I went to a couple. One was maximum impact on student achievement, and when I went into that workshop, I was having great hopes for it, but it wound up not being what I had expected. But when it was somebody trying to sell you something, but what they spoke about with the two school districts that they spoke about was that they were trying to they did curriculum review, so they were trying to pinpoint everything that they possibly would need for curriculum review, for elementary transitions, for having maximum resources, so all your IAs, all your guidance counselors, all your all the people that you have support, that trying to maximize to make sure that you're utilizing all the resources that you have. So as I was sitting there, I was thinking to myself, that's what we do, because we're not able to have all schools have everything, and how we do maximize the impact on our student achievement by you coming up with some of the curriculum things. And I know we don't have enough money to pay for all the science and all the history and all that, but we're making do with what we have to give our students what we need. And one of the things that they were talking about was that dollars don't lead to excellence. Excellence is having strong management and strong systems, not more resources, but allocating all our resources responsibly. So as I sat there, I was just thinking to myself proudly how we do that as a district, you know, with the limited resources that we have. So as I go to these conferences and I sit in these, I'm always happy to see that we're either on par or ahead of a lot of the other districts that are out there. So that was pretty amazing. And then we had these, I went to Safe Schools, and I don't think we've acknowledged enough how we have this advisory committee that we have, where every student at the high school has somebody to go to. So as I was talking, because I wound up having to speak about what our school does, and the woman that ran this workshop was excellent, because she was surprised to hear that one of the school districts, and we were the only one who had an advisory committee. And what I had suggested to Brian was, why can't we bring it down to the 7th grade, where the 7th grade can have, right from the moment they get in, have the same advisor all the way through to high school? Because everything that happens in society plays out in our schools. You know, and having these 7th graders have a high school student that can be a mentor towards them, or where they feel safe, that we know that every single child at the high school has an adult that's looking at them every 2 weeks when you have your advisory groups. And I think we should let the community know that we do have this, because I don't think I've ever seen it posted in Facebook or in The Voice or anything about what an impact this advisory group has. I've spoken to many kids who actually look forward to those advisories, because they know that this teacher is and we have everybody, like Brian and Kim are on the advisory, that we should have a bus driver, because I know you're probably going to need a few more if you bring it down to the 7th grade, have a bus driver be one of the advisors, or even have, like, the National Honor Society, one of those kids be, you know, advisors. So, and I was impressed to see again that this was a room full of people, standing room, that they were coming up to me afterwards asking us how we did it. But the one question that the person in charge of it asked is, do we do a training session for the advisors as to how they should, because they just said to me, which kind of struck to me, that if you have one rogue advisor, it could bring down that particular advisory group. So I don't know if we do any training on that type of thing.
I don't believe we do. It's a voluntary program, or whatever I call it, now. Not all teachers are advisors, but all students are in an advisory. So could we do training? Absolutely. And should we? Yes. But I would say even with training, that's not going to say they wouldn't
No, absolutely
rogue
not.
individual, but absolutely, that's a great advice. Yeah.
It's just my suggestion would be to see if we can bring it to the 7th grade, because I think it would really have an impact on these students.
And I was actually emailing with Alan McRae and Patrick, I think you were CC'd on that last week, and they both are already talking about it, something Alan had thought about. Again, logistically, how does that work? Ideally, like you mentioned, picking up an advisory, so I'm in the second year with my sophomores, our sophomores, Patty's. Not anymore, it's just me now. Just saying. No guilt. But starting in 7th grade would be powerful, but then how do the middle school teachers, how does that work? I think that's a different struggle. So, but logistically, I think it's something to work on, but I think, conceptually, they were both super excited about the idea.
Yeah. And the one other one that we went was the assembly that they had, and it was on diversity, which was similar to what Narissa said, but it was interesting the way they explained diversity is most people think of it as color or religion or something like that. So they had asked the question, if you had 12 white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed men, what would you think? And, a lot of us are saying, well, there's no diversity there, but actually there is, because they could come from different countries, different religions, different social backgrounds, different blue-collar or poverty. So they were trying to make it so that you looked at diversity in a different way, that all of us are diverse in different ways. So I just thought it was really interesting. And one of his quotes was, "It's not what you look at, it's what you see." So I thought that was very interesting. And me and Brian actually had to do an exercise with, who are you? So you had to go back and forth with, who are you? Like, I'm female, and I'm an engineer, and I'm an advocate. And so it was really interesting, and it was hard to come up with all these things of who you are, And Brian was saying he was a wonderful superintendent, but
What is this pick on Brian night?
But, so overall, I thought the conference was very good, and again, that I'm really pleased to see how much farther we are, and what a great school committee we have, because you hear so many of the school committees that don't get along with their central office. So I think for our district, I think we're very lucky to have the passionate people that we have around the table. That's it.
Brian?
I keep talking, so I would say it was Dr. Derek Gay was the gentleman who spoke, and I would say that I don't know if this is on, I don't think I have ever heard someone speak about diversity the way that he did. And he stands up as a youngish African-American male, and it's a discussion on diversity, and of course, me and my middle-aged white male purview pretty much had him pegged for what he was going to say. And I think that was an hour and 15 minutes. It was a long session, and it was absolutely riveting the way he made diversity have nothing to do with one category or one race or one. He was absolutely phenomenal. Two quick things. One is it was 70 on 70. It was 70 minutes on Chapter 70 with Tracy Novick from MASC. And my takeaway on that was, A, she's phenomenal, and I've never heard Chapter 70 explained so well. But B, man, we got a long way to go to have people really understand the impacts of Chapter 70 and the fact that this is not Chapter 70 reform and the Student Opportunity Act, that there's still very embedded beliefs that for us as a district and 40% or of the other districts, we're not going to get any more Chapter 70 than we ever have before. There's going to be some circuit breaker improvements and because a lot of efforts of a lot of people, but there's still a lot of misinformation out there and very diverse and contradictory opinions about who deserves what. So that was an interesting session for sure. And the last one I was going to mention.
Lessons on Dedham?
Yes, thank you. So the Dedham, so it was lessons on Dedham, so you know that the Dedham Teachers Association struck the the end of October into November. So it was the superintendent, a couple school committee members, all the attorneys involved, and it was very interesting. You know, my biggest takeaway walking away from that was being incredibly appreciative of the Triton Regional Teachers Association, and certainly they are a labor organization, and when push comes to shove, their job is to defend the employees, and they do it well, and they do it fairly, and they do it justly. But there is a movement about making statements. If you look at what was settled, they basically settled the best and final offer, which was offered to them on August 1st. So nothing changed. There were some subtle nuances, but that was a statement about changing the narrative and changing the script. I'm not going to say nothing like that could ever happen here at Triton, but I'm super appreciative of the Triton Teachers Association, their leadership, their focus, sticking to the issues. When we have differences, we talk about it, we work through it, but even at the negotiations table, we move as much as possible towards interest-based bargaining. It's not, we have a package, we slide it across the table, wait for attorneys to come, and it's just a very different collaborative approach. So some great lessons learned, and mostly walked out of there with some great appreciation.
Thank you. So 2 quick notes. So Lessons from Dedham actually shared an entire Google Drive worth of files. I couldn't copy those onto our drive, so if you look in the Lessons from Dedham folder, you're going to find a Google Doc that has the link to their Google Drive in it. So you can actually go to their Google Drive, and it has
A lot.
7 or 8 folders with multiple documents per folder that go through press releases and basically the entire process for them. Second note, one of the sessions that none of us attended because it was a Saturday morning session that I think was like it was the member credit type deals that they offered it for, was calling all chairs, which was both the role of the chair, which Deb and I had been talking about anyway, and apparently yes, they're doing a subcommittee chair thing now as well, so that it combined everything together. None of us attended that because we had left, on Friday. Most of the big sessions are over then. But I copied that entire directory over, so you have the role of the chair presentation, the role of the chair guidebook that they typically used in the role of the chair. So if you have any interest in that down the road, that's something you can review. And they usually offer that at least in the Summer Institute and in the fall session, the fall conference. And then there is a specific document in there that's about subcommittees themselves and subcommittee chairing and the policies around subcommittees and things like that. So if you're a subcommittee chair or are thinking about potentially wanting to become a subcommittee chair in the future, I would recommend that as a read as well. So those are in that directory as well under the Calling All Chairs folder.
Can I ask
Yeah, go ahead, Dina. Sorry.
Linda, how did the delegate assembly go? Was there a lot of changes?
I did not attend because they moved it to Friday afternoon.
Yep, they put it at the end of the day on Friday. They did some strategic schedule changes this year.
Strategic.
Yes.
Sounds like it.
Not sure if that played out well for them.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know how many they had. MASC actually published out the delegate assembly report today, but I haven't had a chance to read it because I've been busy all day. I just saw it come through. So we can always review that and find out, but yeah, we couldn't believe it when we opened our, the books that you actually get there and found out that had been shifted. Yes. So they also set some really big sessions against each other, which was a bit disappointing because there were times where I think all of us would have loved to have been in 2 places if we could have, and then there were other sessions where it was kind of, you were not sure you wanted to go to, any of them were going to be really valuable to you. So that was kind of disappointing too. I know, I don't think, did you attend the superintendent evaluation session? Okay, so I copied over the documents from that because I know Linda and I had talked about it, but neither of us ended up going because there was, again, something in that session that, same schedule that we got pulled into, so that's there, if that's something I know you're working on superintendent evaluation, so those documents are out there too, because I pulled everything that I thought we had gone to, or that would be of interest, like the chair. Any questions about the conference? No? Okay. District Communications Committee. So quick note here, just so that all of you hopefully have seen it already, but just to reiterate, the meeting is tomorrow at 6:30. It's at Salisbury Police Department. They had a scheduling conflict with Town Hall, so we've been moved to the Police Department tomorrow night. The intent is to look at the regional agreement. Newbury, as of the last DCC, had not had a chance to review the proposed regional agreement changes with their Board of Selectmen. They have now done that, so they will bring back their findings or their discussion points on that. And then verbal discussion on the budget, like we're going to go through tonight for fiscal year '21, and an update on the state advocacy. I don't anticipate that it will be a long meeting, but, we're moving along through that regional agreement process, which I think is really important to keep us on track right now, so. Oh, yeah, and just a quick update, because it did happen essentially after our meeting, last DCC meeting, is that Neil Harrington was appointed the municipal negotiations representative. They didn't have the Newbury representative to make that decision. We had scheduled it for 6:15 with the DCC at 6:30 on the last DCC date, and the Newbury representative didn't make it to help make that decision, so the decision was made to kind of postpone it and have the Raleigh and Salisbury representatives remain afterward with the Newbury representative to choose the municipal negotiations rep, and that turned out to be Neil Harrington. So thank you to Neil for serving. I know that he had mixed feelings, but I'm happy that he stepped forward and is doing that.
He's back on track.
He's back on track. I know, it's a lot of time, I think, and he doesn't have a lot of time to spare, so, but I'm glad he's sparing it for us. Fiscal year '21 budget projections, discussion only.
Yes, so this, put my microphone on. So this is a placeholder for a verbal discussion, because normally at this point in the year, we're bringing to you some high-level projections for next year. We are negotiating our two largest labor groups within both the teachers and the instructional assistants. So there's a massive unknown going into next year. Certainly there's, I think, I would say an aggressive and conservative approach that the PNN is taking in negotiations, but as far as putting an actual dollar to that, I think we're a couple months away from, we're early winter or midwinter before we're going to be ready to put a number on paper to say this is where we think we should be budgeting. There are significant changes that Michelle's going to go over in regards to the fiscal '20 operating budget in regards to special education costs. Some of those, there are going to be some savings for next year's budget with students aging out, but equally there's going to be some increases that we're going to have to make up next year that we're finding a way to patch through this year. That hasn't changed, right? So mostly this was a quick FYI to say normally we'd be providing you with documentation and a snapshot, and that we're not able to provide you anything meaningful at this point. We could certainly provide information to you, and it would have a lot of question marks. And the fear is always putting out information that is going to be seen as at all informative, and that doesn't become inflammatory later on when things change, for better or worse. So at this point, it is a little too soon. Hoping that by December, I don't think we're going to have anything more concrete in regards to our big numbers. But then by January, when we start the normal process, be able to provide a lot more clarity, as we have in the past. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Okay. Moving along, student activities account audit report. I'm assuming Michelle is taking this.
Yes, I am. Okay, there is a new additional Annex 11B that was passed out this evening, which I apologize, they were not included in your packets. So this portion of the agenda will actually cover Annex 11 and 11B as well, which I know only the Finance Subcommittee has seen 11B previous to this evening. So student activities have been part of the ongoing challenge here for many, many, many years, well before my time, I think well before Brian's time as well in central office. So we finally tackled that. And last spring, we brought in Roselli Clark, which was our audit firm, new last year, and they did a student activity account audit. This is required by the Department of Ed to occur every 3 years. We have never had one done, but DESE has come out with new compliance regulations in the past few years and are really cracking down on school districts. So we finally had this performed. We knew there would be lots of little findings. That was not a surprise to us. But each school basically has a checking account that the principal is in charge of and a savings account, which is housed in central office. The beginning balances through the audit, we found that the beginning balances were never correct in the QuickBooks in each of the schools. So if you start with the wrong number to start with, well, you end with the wrong number. So we had lots of issues, like I said. And it was not due to a lack of effort of anyone working on the accounts, but really a lack of training and guidance. One of the findings was the athletic team accounts were not considered student activities, but they were housed in the high school student activity account. We were aware of that. We started that transition a little less than a year ago now. A lot of the team accounts have set up 501c3s now, or the rest of the teams have been transferred into an athletic revolving account that the athletic director is overseeing at this point in conjunction with central office. So we've rectified that situation. A couple other findings that transfers between sub-accounts within the high school require school committee approval. That has never been brought to school committee. So going forward, most likely you will see a couple times a year requests for transfers to take from the class of, 2017 account and apply it to another account. Class accounts are only allowed to be on the books for 3 years past graduation. So anything prior to 3 years old needs to be resolved as well. So there are lots of little nuances that really need to be followed, and we really need to stay on top of them. And now going forward, all the school secretaries and the principals had been doing monthly reconciliations, but they were only reconciling the checking account piece. Really, the total of all their sub-accounts, whatever their activities are, should total the savings and the checking piece. So really, they weren't reconciling. They were reconciling their outstanding checks, but they really were not reconciling to the bottom line. So we had that audit completed last spring, and that was actually the June 30th, 2018 activity, all of fiscal 18 activity. And then this past summer, so that is the result of the Annex 11B that you guys all received tonight. So there's a lot of detail in here. Some of it's rather interesting reading. So if you do have any questions, I'm still here for another 2 weeks, and honestly, I've been living and breathing this for the past year, so even after I'm gone, feel free to ping me, email me, call me. I know most of that information, by heart, so I am available if you should have any questions whatsoever. The second part of this process was conducted this past summer and into the beginning of the school year, which is the Annex 11 on page 67. That's the Triton Regional School District Student Activity Analysis. So we brought the audit firm back. We're not required to have this audit every year. We're just supposed to conduct some internal control procedures. So they did not perform an audit of the fiscal 19 activity and student activities, but what they did was do an analysis of all the activities and see which ones had been used over the past few years, see which ones were inactive, see which ones were in deficit, and then take the combination of all their balances and look at the general ledger and see what the variances were. And this is something that had never been done to my knowledge. So we started, basically this report gave us good starting balances for FY20, which is what we really needed. So as a result of that, on page 3 of 9 in this report, you'll see each of the schools listed. We have Pine Grove, Newberry Elementary, Salisbury Elementary, Middle School, and High School, with a total on the savings account of $224,506, and in the checking account of $28,998. The general ledger at that time had $261,948. So the GL, general ledger, which we also call the GL, had excess funds of $37,441. Basically, this was most likely from a combination of when we pay out a student activity fund expense, and we charge it through central office, it never got allocated back to the student activity funds. It's a pretty common occurrence throughout the Commonwealth. Like I said, DESE is really starting to crack down on compliance in this area, so it's nothing new, not surprising, but it's something we definitely wanted to clean up moving forward. And it was part of one of my many challenges, and as you guys all know me, I need a challenge to keep going. So I've cleaned up a lot of challenges, but this being one of the final ones. And
We have
So-
more, Michelle, if you
was gonna
need
say-
more.
there's not too many more challenges, to be honest, not within our control anyways.
We can make some.
Yeah. So the excess funds of $37,441.78. Really, these funds started in the student activities, they're still in the student activities, and later in the agenda, we'll actually have an action item to discuss what we should do with these funds. It should be noted that there's also, Tony Roselli, the auditor, also mentioned, I don't know if he mentioned in this report, he definitely did in the other audit report, that there's an account at the high school called the Viking Master account. It is actually a combination, I guess about 10 years ago, or maybe even more, QuickBooks crashed. There was no backup, and they never figured out where these balances should have been allocated. They knew they were student activity funds, but they didn't know which sub-account they belonged in. So they've just been carrying forward this $26,000 for a number of years. So that's also part of the excess funds that we'll talk about later in the agenda. But basically, the auditors have done a fabulous job with this. The annual audit for our regular financials is going on right now this week, actually, and the auditor is popping into each school to check in with the secretaries to make sure they're on track. We're putting in monthly reconciliation procedures that our district accountant will be following through on a regular basis, and the school secretaries have been unbelievably cooperative and just open to change. They have been wonderful to work with. And they're hungry for guidance, and that's what we're starting to provide them now. So it's been a great process, really has, and I think we came out on the good side of it, absolutely.
All right, questions for Michelle? Maureen?
All right, Michelle, I have just a quick question, something that jumped out at me on page 4 under the high school detail of clubs. I'm just curious, I mean, it lists the 4 different classes, 20, 21, 22, 23, but there's a class 2013. Why is there still money from class of 2013?
It is unknown why some of them are there. Some of them are due to accounting errors through the high school. So really to try to find out why that's there, it would take a lot of time and effort to try to determine it.
So that money then is sort of in that amount that you said, 37, is that counted in the excess funds?
No, what we're doing on some of the erroneous accounts, which I consider the class of 2013 because it's more than the 3 years old, we're taking care of some of the account deficits, cleaning it up, and anything additional stays under the student activity account and goes to the administration account, which are rather small now that we've taken out all the gifts and donations out of there.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, I'd like to thank Michelle, because I know this was a phenomenal amount of work, along with the school offices and,
So many people.
yes, central office, the PTAs, I know, ended up taking some of the accounts. It was a lot of work over many months, so thank you very much for this effort. And Finance Subcommittee has already gone through this. Dave Jack was fortunately there, so he is sort of hitting the ground running on this. I thought it was interesting because he came up afterwards and said that he is, I think, never seen this or very seldom seen this in a district before, and was impressed to see that this was going on here, that we were actually doing this reconciliation rather than just a standard in-house kind of quick look at the books to satisfy the DESE requirements. So that was nice to hear. All right. Monthly report of the superintendent of schools, please. No, I don't think so. We'll
I
have,
think it's supposed to receive and file.
we have to receive and file?
I'm sorry, that should.
Oh, yes, sorry, you're right. It's not called
Okay.
out in the
That's right,
action.
it's just not called out.
Yes. Can I get a motion to receive and file the Triton Regional School District Student Activity Analysis?
I'll make a motion to receive and file the student activity analysis.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, thank you, unanimous. Now on to the
And
monthly
now-
report of the superintendent of schools, please.
So you have an updated version on the table this evening. There's a couple corrections to the list of students receiving the Adams Scholarship, as well as adding one section. In the first section, it's a new hire. We talked about Patty retiring after many years, and so we did hire her replacement. Her name is Maureen Dunlevy. She was actually here for about 3 hours this morning, getting set up and starting to look through Patty's well-organized lists of everything she does by month and day and all the different tasks. So I'm very confident that it will be handed off well. So just to note, actually it was raised that the job description is actually, it's the executive assistant, so reports to me as the superintendent, but there's obviously a primary function that this person holds in regards to working with you. So all of the roles that Patty fills now in regards to posting agendas, managing the meeting process, being your point of contact for anything, basically, anytime there's communications through you to the towns or vice versa, that Maureen will take that role on. So apologize because that didn't come through in the report as I was writing it. So there is definitely a distinct role that this person plays for you as the committee. The stadium and track repair, as you remember, basically it comes down to there's two phases. One is the inside D area. The second phase is the length against the marsh. The inside D area has been completed. There's a question about the elevation against the inside of the field. But other than that, the track and the lanes are perfect, spot on. The length is still being reviewed. Actually was working with Chris Walsh today to talk to the engineers about replotting all the points to see when and if and how the wall is moving before we determine the best fix. As I reported to you last month, the solution to fix in kind with what exists now to repair would be at the cost of David White and Sons, which is the other repair was at his cost. I may come to you or through the finance subcommittee to make a recommendation to spend a little extra money for an improved repair, the basics being moving from asphalt to concrete, which moves less, but that is yet to be determined and will be part of the process we're reviewing with the engineers now. The NEASC visit, the site or the team was actually on site today. It was actually a great group of folks that are coming to visit. So we're part of the new process. We're in the first cohort of schools to be part of the new process with the new 2020 standards. Certainly a lot of information I can provide to you if you want to see reports and information. There was a self-assessment study that was completed over the past year that was provided to this group that visited today and will be back tomorrow. They then will, based on their conversations they met with us as a central office group, they met with student groups, parent groups, faculty, you name it. They were visiting classrooms all day. We'll be back to write and/or continue those discussions tomorrow. The collaborative conference report will outline the progress that the committee wants to see when they make their decennial visit, which is 2 years out. So it's not exactly confirmed whether it's the fall of '21 or the spring of '22, but that's the decennial visit. That will happen in roughly 2 years. Between this conference and the report that they write, it will acknowledge the self-study, the areas they agree or areas of needed growth, areas that they might disagree with, and then the collaborative is working with the school to go over it, review it, and then set a course of what they want to see in 2 years' time. So it actually is a very good process. Pam Gould, who is a superintendent in Sandwich, Massachusetts, she's part of the visiting team, the NEASC visiting team. She's in my NISIP cohort, so I know her well. Her words were, it's one of the best professional developments I've ever experienced. I think she said this is how many she's gone through, 13, I mean, something crazy, how many processes she's gone through. So it's certainly, it's rigorous, but I believe that a lot of the redundancy that for years MASS fought with NEASC in regards to this kind of separate process standing over here, when we already have school improvement processes and we have policies that you've established as a committee, so it's far more aligned. So I don't think there's anything in the report, the self-study report, that would surprise you. Concerns that were raised, areas identified. You know, our conversation was with the group today, said they felt like it was very realistic and fair, but certainly that's information that we can pass out and make public, and review and answer questions. Pine Grove update, we're at punch listing. As frustrating as punch listing is, it's actually going very quickly. I mean, there are many projects that you speak with PMs and OPMs and designers where they're punching for 6 months, 12 months, 9 months. By and large, it's narrowed down. There's a couple items on that list that are really frustrating and want fixed, but by and large, it's punching out very well. And the items that are still on the list are working, the OPM is working with vendors on furniture warranty issues and floor issues. But by and large, the little finish up punch list items are wrapping up as we speak. School business administrator hire, I will say that as for an interim plan, Dave Jack, everyone was here today. Dave Jack was in today, meeting with Michelle, starting that handoff. Again, the hope is, the plan is that we're set to have an interim arrangement through July 1st. The hope is that we would be able to find someone sooner than that. So the job is posted. It was posted a week and a half ago. I sent it off to MASS and MASBO today as far as getting it posted more broadly. Looking to wrap up the advertising process in November, do some paper screening the week of Thanksgiving, set up interviews for that first or second week of December. I'm going to have one representative that we'll have on the agenda for next week's Finance Committee. Have one member from the Finance Committee. Also going to reach out to a Finance Committee member from the towns, as well as a couple other representatives, and have a search committee. Hopefully we end up with some great candidates. If we don't, we're not going to settle. We'll keep it open, and whether we delay and start again in January or what have you, we'll keep the process moving until we find the right person. Again, another one that will be hard to replace. Again, we can create problems. The position's open if you want to apply. John and Abigail Adams Scholarship recipients. I will not read the names, but certainly we had the annual breakfast the other morning. Dina was there representing the school committee. It's short, it's sweet, which I think everyone appreciates, but it's a great opportunity to celebrate. My guess is the vast majority of these students will not take advantage of the scholarship, but the ability to say that you were in the top 25% in the categories and performance levels on the MCAS is impressive, and it's certainly something we want to celebrate within our senior class. And the last thing I did add, this is new, just for your information, that we are applying for a JV wrestling waiver for grade 8 students to participate. Went into detail in the report, but the basic gist is you have to complement all your weight classes, or you forfeit those matches, and obviously that leads to overall scoring issues as a team score. We tend to fill out our higher weight classes more than our lower weight classes, so allowing 8th grades to participate allows us to do that. And to note, this is basically common practice in the Cape Ann League or everyone in the Cape Ann League and the Northeast Conference is basically waiving 8th graders, or they're part of a co-op, and it's multiple schools participating on a co-op. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Dina?
Brian, I'm a little concerned yet about the stadium, having been involved with that from the beginning. I remember when that was in process of planning and everything else, there was some concern about the wall being close to the marsh and all of that, and I thought that we had that looked at ad nauseum. So I'm a little concerned that we still have this problem, and help me to understand, are we talking about it's the walkway that is sinking yet, or is it actually the wall that's shifting, or both?
So this has to do with debating how survey shots, the points were plotted. So there's a question about One set of plans over 3 years of shots showed that it was actually the wall sinking. As the engineers, again, so there's David White and Sons as a general contractor, there's the wall developer, there's our engineers, the wall company has its own engineers. So there's lots of engineers looking at this. I believe, and this is what we're hoping to confirm with John Perry at Gale and Associates. None of the folks we worked with at Gale are still there. So John Perry confirming that it's actually the wall is staying put in regards to elevation and lateral movement, and it's the walkway that's actually sinking. So if you stand on the turf and you look, and it's actually that northwest light pole is the worst of it. If you stand on the turf and look out towards the marsh, the latter statement I made makes a lot more sense with what your eye sees, because the fence that's on the top of the wall stays perfectly straight. If you look, the whole horizon, but then you look at the fence that's 4 feet, 5 feet in,
You see a dip.
you can see the dip, and there are parts of the walkway that are actually lower than the bottom of the fence. So there are shots that show anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4.5 inch drops, which when you walk that pathway, that makes sense. But there is no drop in the wall. So all of what we're seeing with our eyes matches what we believe all the engineers are agreeing now. So if the wall's staying put, lateral and horizontal, or vertical and horizontal, then that's great, right? Because the wall is the retaining system.
Exactly.
So then it's just the packing within. So it's a matter of pulling out the asphalt, repacking, and then I'm going to propose, unless there's some ridiculous cost associated with it, to put that back, that walkway basically from end zone to end zone, doing it with concrete and rebar, because it just won't move the same way. Even if cavities get created underneath it,
Right, it'll
it will
hold.
support itself with the concrete and the rebar.
My question is, why would we not go back to Gale and Associates then, since they were the engineers that really were in charge of all this, and say, why was this not known? And see if they don't
Well, we have.
pay for part of it. But
Oh, they won't. No, I mean, the reality is, we did everything that the standard said we should. We did all the core drillings. I forget, that was before your time. I think we had a couple cores that were 120 feet down. So there were 90-foot cores all over the field, all along there. So we did all of the engineering practice that we should. The reality is, and David White himself would say this, or the engineers, you just never know, right? The earth is going to move how the earth wants to move. We're going to study as best we can. If there was some catastrophic failure, not i.e. loss of life, but just where things to fall apart,
big sinkhole or
very
something.
different,
Right,
very
okay.
different discussion. This isn't. This is very subtle movement. It's been 3 years now, or like 3.5 years since it was completed. And it seems to be slowing down, which, for me, David White has not walked away. He's been true. He said, we're going to fix this once. We're going to fix it when it's done. The D area is fixed now. He hasn't run away. He's retired. He keeps coming out of retirement to meet with me. But so so he's staying true to it. I'd rather wait until, if the settling is going to stop, get it when it's done, fix it once and right.
Exactly.
But absolutely, I've asked that question numerous times of the engineers. And the reality is, all sides, right? They both have a vested interest in blaming the other, and everyone agrees. It's the reality of engineering. You can only study the earth so much, and then you have to,
But what I-
impacts are going to happen.
Right, I mean, and I am nowhere near being an engineer, but I don't understand why that retaining wall would stay and everything else would sink, and why they would not anticipate that. That's all. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you're going after them as
Yep.
much as we can, and I
Yep.
certainly hope we keep pushing that.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, Maureen?
So, a quick question, so I understand. When you're talking about possibly replacing the asphalt with concrete, so would that run from one end of that retaining wall to the other?
Yes, so the area between the wall, so you've been out there enough to know.
Yeah, I've been out there a lot.
A
yeah.
lot. So there's the retaining wall, and the fence is cored into the retaining wall.
Yeah,
And there's a roughly 5-foot asphalt path.
Right.
Maybe 6 feet. About 5 feet in, there's a fence.
Yep.
And then it's asphalt over to the edge of the
track.
track surface.
Right.
So basically, from the edge of the track surface, they would dig out underneath. The track surface stays
okay.
intact. From the track surface to the wall is solid concrete.
okay.
So that would be literally 100 yards from end zone to end zone. They then pour the concrete, do all the rebarring, do all the stress, not cracking, but cutting and the troweling, and then go back in and core the fence the entire length of the way down. It has to be all new fence at that point. So then it would be, it doesn't need to be that full length, but for me, the type A, it's got to be symmetrical, so I don't want little patches of this and patches of that. And I think David White has said that too. Like, if this is his product, this is his name, people come here all the time and talk about how amazing and beautiful it is, the location and the product. So we want it to look good, you know, so then we're going to do it symmetrically.
Further questions for Brian on anything on his report?
Did you hear all those, huh? When I said the word symmetry? I might talk about being symmetrical. Thank you, thank you. Please don't go.
No? No further questions for Brian? Can I get a motion to receive and file the report of the monthly report of the superintendent of schools, please?
So moved.
I'll second it.
From Linda. Any further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I should say Brian put a lot of work into that too, so I'll thank him for his work. Moving on to item 10, general action items, and I'm going to assume that you are Ron Fitzgerald. Am I correct? Yes, all right. So now that we're in the general section where we can address what you're here for, I'm going to suggest that we move item E, which is the Whittier Regional Vocational Technical High School Committee item, up in the agenda so that poor Ron can go home at some point tonight. As much as I'm sure the meeting is riveting, I'm also sure that you have a home waiting for you, so. So you should have 2 letters in your packet. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to find my letters. So what? Yes, 116 and 118, thank you. 2 items in your packet. So Elena Gilbert contacted me roughly a month and a half ago now. She sits in the Salisbury seat on the Whittier School Committee. She has moved, actually already, out of state. So she is no longer able, since she's no longer a Salisbury resident, to serve on the Whittier School Committee. So she contacted me along with the Whittier superintendent because the way that their regional agreement is set up, we appoint all of the Raleigh, New Brand, or the 3 Raleigh, New Brand, Salisbury representatives to the Whittier School Committee. As a result of receiving that, we put out on notice that the seat would come open, looking for letters of intent. Those were due by the end of October. We received 2, which you have in your packet. The process, my understanding is in the past, is that when there have been multiple letters of interest, we have done this exclusively on letters of interest, not on interviews or anything like that. So you have what you have in front of you. I hope you've had a chance to review them. We can start 2 ways. I can either take some general input on the seat, or if someone has a strong opinion, they can make a motion towards nominating or toward appointing one of these 2 individuals, and we can work from there. Seeing no one has any. You move your mic just back a little bit, sorry.
Back?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know either of the 2 people, but I do know Elena, and if this, I don't know if this is appropriate, but Mr. Fitzgerald is the one that Elena suggested for the position to me, so.
Okay. Maureen?
I was just going to say that in reading both letters prior to coming to the meeting, the one that did stand out to me was Mr. Fitzgerald's letter, as somebody that I would be interested in putting forward.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion and we can go from there?
Sure. I make a motion that we nominate Mr. Ronald K. Fitzgerald to the Whittier Tech School Committee.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? I mean, it stood out to me, too, that I think you have kind of 2 choices. You have somebody who has kind of investment and experience with family there versus somebody who has extensive
Yes,
experience in schools and teaching and that type of thing. So very, very different backgrounds. I personally don't have a preference in either direction because I think both of them are valuable. Obviously, we have people even on our committee. Some of them have students in the district. Some of them have formerly had students in the district. You know, some of them have teaching experience. Some of us don't. There's obviously a wide variety of reasons why people would want to serve and why they would be good in a position. So I think either of these 2 individuals would be excellent. Any further discussion before we have a vote on the motion that's on the table? All right. All in favor of the motion to appoint Mr. Fitzgerald as the Salisbury representative to the Whittier Regional School Committee, please raise your hand. All right, we have a unanimous vote. Congratulations, Mr. Fitzgerald. And I believe you need to go, he needs to be sworn in at Salisbury Town Hall, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
And I think we'll communicate with you. I believe you have to be sworn in, and the timing is different. It's not, there wasn't an election, so.
Okay.
We'll coordinate that, and
We'll figure it out.
we'll be in touch.
I have your contact information. So congratulations, and
Yay.
not that we can welcome you to the Whittier School Committee, but welcome to the Whittier School Committee. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to go back to the fiscal year 20 operating budget, approved revised budget. So this is under X general action items, item A. And I'm assuming we're back to Michelle?
Yes. Okay. This is Annex 13 on page 93 is the FY20 final adjusted operating budget. I can almost do these books in my sleep now. So I was trying to explain these to Dave Jack today. He's like, wow, okay. Like, it takes a little while to get used to them. So the FY20 final adjusted budget, the bottom line for the expenditures remain the same. We have not changed the revenues as well, so the assessments remain exactly the same as they were with our budget back in March, and the budget that we began the year with. We're simply reallocating the funds, which I'll walk you through on page 1. If you wanted to view the individual line item changes, those can be found on the site locations on pages 8 through 20, but I'm not going to walk through those unless you have specific questions on those. So on page 1, we have the changes from the March final budget to the November adjusted budget. As I mentioned, there's no change in revenue. So for the changes in expenditures, we have no particular order. Really just as I went through the budget and found them. The high school athletics, we switched our athletic trainer services from a contracted services position to, we brought that in-house. We also added on some administration support that we actually added back. We had cut that from the budget a couple years back. This was discussed in the spring budget, but we finally made the change after the budget numbers had settled. So that we added $36,500 to the salary line, and we took out $32,000 from the contracted services line within athletics. Banking fees, while we are making a great amount in our investments and our return for interest income, our fees have gone up a little bit more. So I'm estimating that will cost about $4,000 over where we currently budget it. We did exceed our budget last year by a small amount, and I think we're going to exceed that a little bit more this year. Special education contracted services, we had extensive discussions during the spring budget process of reallocating some of the special ed costs for the program that was being discontinued due to the students aging out. And we reallocated them to a program at the high school that we now call the LIFT program. We also referred to it as the Bridge program early on. I think the LIFT is the final name, is that correct? Okay, that's the current name anyways. It's called the High School LIFT program. And then we added an additional special ed program at Newbury Elementary School. So really, we took that money from contracted services and put most of it into salaries because those programs are just run by internal staff. Home tutoring line, we are finding that the amount that we budgeted last year is not sufficient. We are finding more additional services that we have to provide for in-house students. So we're raising that by $15,050. Substitute teaching services, this is a line that continually, this is one of my greatest challenges that I don't think we'll ever fix. It's continually underfunded, so I'm proposing raising that by $25,000. Currently, I believe we budget $250,000. We've been spending in the ballpark of $300,000, so we are looking pretty good this year, but I'm still anticipating running short. So I think by adding another $25,000 to that line, we'll be a little bit closer to our actual expenditures. Regular ed transportation and homeless transportation. I'm proposing reducing them by 4,000 and 6,000 respectively, and putting it into a new line we're calling foster student transportation. Department of Ed is requiring that we report on that expense separately. I've had to go back for the last year or so and find out which invoices are actually foster students, which ones are homeless students, and report it that way. Going forward, it would be a lot easier, less tracking, less backtracking, rather, if we can just create a new line, allocate it with a small amount of money, and then track the expenses from the very beginning. So we're going to do that, or proposing to do that. So the foster student transportation, we're reallocating $10,000 to that line. Heating, fuel, and electricity, our utilities are running, when I finally looked at the FY19 close, our utility costs were significantly more than we had budgeted. Part of it was because of the Pine Grove building project, which the building project did reimburse us quite a bit. So it was really hard to get a true cost of what that school is going to be costing us. And honestly, we won't have solid figures on that until the end of this year coming. With a new school, yes, we have a lot of energy efficient systems put into place, but we also have more systems put into place. We have more outlets. We have a lot more devices requiring electricity. So typically when you do a building project, everyone's like, no, it's going to be more green, it's going to save electricity, and it's not necessarily the case. It usually produces or demands more electricity. So I do suspect that's what we're going to see. I compared the September and October invoices against last year, and I am seeing a significant increase. So at this point, I propose raising the heating fuel line by $21,000 and the electricity line by $55,000, and that is for district-wide. That's not just Pine Grove, while Pine Grove is probably a good portion of that. I think all of our lines could be increased a little bit there. Data phone service, we need to increase that by $4,600 just based on our current service. A portion of our data service is reimbursed by our E-rate program. So when we finally get those figures each year, it leaves a little bit of a variance. So projecting that shortfall to be about $4,600. Medical insurance, through our negotiations last year, we were able to save quite a bit of money. And of that savings, which was about $200,000 in the budget, we're going to use $182,691 to allocate towards other lines. And part of that is to go to the utilities and all these other lines that I'm discussing here. Our unemployment insurance, for the past couple years, or actually since I've been here, so for the past 3.5 years, our unemployment lines have been really, our activity's been minimal. We've been able to reduce the budget, so we reduced the budget this past year. I believe our budgeted figure prior to tonight was about $18,000. We're finding that we've used more than half of that already this year. So I propose that we add $10,000 to that line. However, I did receive the most recent month's bill today, and it was $1,200, so it's come down substantially from where it was over the summer. So it's looking pretty good. So I think you'll definitely be okay with that line unless something unexpected arises. Other tuitions, last year we were responsible for a student who was placed, or I believe they placed themselves, or the family did, into a recovery high school. It's a tuition that we are responsible for regardless of who places the student there. So we ended up paying about $11,000 last year. So far, we are not responsible for any students this year attending a recovery high school. So we had budgeted $11,000, so I'm taking out $10,000 of that just to keep $1,000 placeholder so we do not forget about that line. But I do not anticipate that we'll need those budgeted funds this year. Special ed tuitions, a reduction of $580,218, and this is not because we have savings in this line by any means. Actually, this line is over budget. It is the one area that I think we need to continually monitor throughout the year very closely. And as Brian mentioned, we do have some savings for next year that we know we will have for students aging out. However, we have a lot of unexpected expenses that we are incurring this year that will follow through and recur next year. So we have to be really careful with that. But the reallocation of the $580,218, we are going to start using our special education IDEA grant and target it to be used for tuition solely. Previously, we had been funding a lot of instructional assistants, probably about 25 of them. It created a lot of additional work in my office. Every single employee that was charged to the grant had to sign off on a acknowledgement form 3 times a year, acknowledging that their salary was paid for a grant, what percentage of their salary was paid for a grant. We had to chase these forms. Every time an instructional aide either left the district or new one was hired, it changed our allocations. We just felt like we were constantly chasing our tails with this piece. So we decided to, we did a little investigation. We sent notes on listserv to see how other districts handle it, and the majority of them use this grant for tuition. So that's what we are proposing to do at this point. So that grant will now be used for tuitions, and the line underneath, the special education assistance, will now be absorbed in the operating budget. So really, it's a shift. It's not necessarily a one-for-one, because we do have a couple other things that the grant needs to be responsible for. We have a proportionate share that we have to make available to other families that do not attend Triton, they're special education students. So we do have a piece that we need to reserve for that, which we still reserve within the grant. But as a result, the $580,000 is coming out of special ed tuitions, and the $611,889 is going into the operating budget for instructional assistance. The next 3 lines, the non-union COLA, the TRTA column movement, and the salary reserve, the $92,584, $96,604, and the $105,761 are just reallocations to various payroll accounts. When we proposed the budget back in March, we pretty much had those as not placeholders, but single lines to be allocated at a later date. So those are reallocated to the individual lines within this budget. And then the offset to all that is just the various payroll accounts, the increase of $458,059. And a lot of that is just the COLA, the allocation, the new employment, the new hires, the savings due to attrition, and all of that. So the bottom line change is 0. But all of these changes are not necessarily one-for-one line, like unemployment you will find in one particular line, but the rest of the payroll ones are across the district. And you can see all that detail on pages 8 through 20 if you wanted to. Only other thing I wanted to point out was on page 6, where you see the school site summary. So you'll notice that a good portion of those dollars come from the district-wide programs, $1,055,542, which is where all of those salary reserve lines are housed, and then they're put into the appropriate schools. And the reason for such a large increase in the 3 elementaries is because of the instructional assistance that grant was paying for. They're primarily housed at the elementary schools. But the bottom line change is 0, and the operating budget remains at $42,476,705, and the capital budget remains at $1,636,094. Any questions?
Questions from Rochelle? I have a couple. The unemployment, do you know if that was one claim, or
We
is that
had
multiple
4
claims?
large claims that we were paying throughout the summer. All but one have been resolved.
Okay.
So hopefully
We really think we're probably
We think
clear
we're
down
good
the road.
unless, part of the problem of being self-insured is someone can resign from Triton, go on to a new job, but if it's within a year, and then they're either terminated or for some reason become eligible for unemployment, we are then responsible for a piece of it. So we do not necessarily have to start a termination, but if they're terminated or wrongfully unemployed, we can be on the hook even though we're not responsible for that action.
Okay.
That seems crazy.
It is crazy. It's a chance you take when you're self-insured. So we do not pay an insurance amount as a safety net, we pay the actual claim. So we save money, but in the long run, we do have unexpected expenses that come back and get us later on. So hopefully we won't have any of those situations. Like I said, all but one of the recurring claims have been resolved at this point.
Okay. And just to be clear, I know that you said that there was roughly 200,000 in savings from healthcare. I know that won't be an exact number because we won't know until down the road. I'm assuming, just so that we're not, that it's very transparent, that whatever remains, since you can't calculate it exactly, will be considered as an excess, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Any questions for Michelle? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the fiscal year 2020 final adjusted operating budget in the amount of $42,476,705, with assessments to Newbury in the amount of $9,386,779, to Raleigh in the amount of $10,547,555, and to Salisbury in the amount of $12,648,939?
I will make a motion to approve those numbers.
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor? All right. And can I get a motion to approve the fiscal year 2020 final adjusted capital budget in the amount of $1,636,094, with assessments to Newbury in the amount of $126,369, to Raleigh in the amount of $141,951, and to Salisbury in the amount of $170,266, please?
I'll make a motion to approve those numbers.
I'll second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor? All right, thank you very much. And that will move us on back to Michelle for the recommendation for student activity surplus funds.
Got a lot of talking tonight.
I guess, when I said there was going to be a
Tickling
big
my throat
hole in December.
There we
Well,
go.
here it is.
All my annual talking done in one meeting. Okay, so as a follow-up item to the student activity audit and follow-up analysis of the funds, we had identified, as I had spoken about before, a surplus in the total amount of $64,058. And part of that is the Viking Master account, which is at the high school in the amount of $26,617. And the unidentified excess across all 5 schools at $37,441. We have a great amount of confidence in these numbers. The auditors looked them over. We've been waiting a few months. We have confirmed that no groups are claiming these funds. And we've been having a great amount of activity with the individual athletic groups, a lot of cooperation. And the new athletic director has not been shy to jump right in. So we do feel confident that these funds are excess. The auditor did mention that we had a couple of options. One, that we could donate the funds to the TEF. While that would be great for us, we really feel that these were intended to be student activity funds, and we think they should remain there. We also talked about creating trust funds, and then we talked about the actual the process of how we would handle that, and it really it seemed to create more work than it was worth. So at this point, we're proposing that you approve these excess funds and reallocate them to the schools to be housed in their administration account and to be used for school-wide enrichment events at each school, up to the principal's discretion. And I proposed the allocation of these funds to be with the $26,617 remaining at the high school, because we're confident that those are high school funds. And the other 4 schools have the additional excess allocated on a per-student basis, so that we're not pitting one school against another and saying, middle school should have more, even though, because they have older students, even though they have less students, so we're just allocating it on a per-student basis. So we propose that the excess funds be allocated to the Triton High School in the amount of $26,617, Triton Middle School in the amount of $8,078, Newbury Elementary School in the amount of $8,819, Pine Grove School in the amount of $9,691, and Salisbury Elementary in the amount of $10,853, for a total of $64,058.
Questions for Michelle? No? I just want to reiterate that these cannot go into the general fund. They have to be used for student activity use.
Yes, I did actually cover that in my memo, but I did not think to say that.
I know.
Yeah, we can't use it for anything operating, we can't use it for anything capital, because that was the first question I got from the principals, well, can I buy something really good for the school? And unfortunately, if it's something that should be a district cost, then no, you cannot use it for that. So that's why we had discussed an enrichment events such as the events that the PTA typically fund would be ideal to use these funds. So, and I think each school, the only one that has an indication that's even coming is the high school.
Okay.
So I think all of these principals will be thrilled once they hear that they actually have funds coming.
I think it's also important to point out that this will be used, and I apologize if you said this, for school-wide events.
Yes.
So this isn't the principal saying, I'm going to pay for a particular student who can't afford this activity, because that was one of the concerns, was
Right.
principals making decisions without a policy behind them that says this is what they should be doing. So this is, we want to bring this event in that benefits every student, pre-K through 6 at Pine Grove School. That's what these funds can be used for.
So the principals then will be getting them, whatever they're going to use it for, will be getting approved by you all, or how does that work? So if they, let's say they want to do some sort of school-wide enrichment thing at Newbury, does the principal have to come to you and get it? No.
They don't have to, because of the nature of student activity funds, where the principal's really the one in charge of spending them. But where we have great processes now, after all these audits and whatnot, we have a greater oversight in advance of anything being spent out of those funds, so.
Because it's coming through our office.
Yeah, it's coming through our office, so we get to see what's happening.
I was just going to say, it's not like they're writing a check, making a decision and writing a check. It's got to go through the office.
Yeah.
Which is why our whole warrants process is.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, you haven't seen that. Never mind.
Oh, the warrants part?
The warrants process has changed, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because everything, instead of checkbooks and stuff like that, everything is literally coming through Michelle.
Well,
Or
come to
her
find
office.
out, the elementary schools do still have their checkbooks. They don't write many checks.
Okay.
I was not aware of that, yes. That was one
Oh.
of my recommendations that needs to be changed. But the high school no longer writes checks, which was 98% of the student activity.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so can I get a motion to approve the allocation and use of excess student activity funds as recommended in Michelle's memo, please?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, it's unanimous, thank you.
Thank you.
And moving on to a review of the amended regional agreement. So I'm now an expert after sitting through an hour and 15 minutes of when to and how to review your regional agreement at the MASC conference. And actually another regional agreement one that also touched on this. So the good news, like I said, is that we're on the right track. It was kind of interesting that a lot of them, again, having just this idea of a budget summit where they would all get together at that point, discuss the budget, and then be done for the year. It's almost the exact same group that they recommend when you want to review your regional agreement to pull together for a regional agreement amendment committee, a RAC, they call it, to sit down and actually go through the regional agreement. So it's selectmen, it's finance committee members, it's school committee, it's district administration. So all those people are already involved in our district communication. So I felt confident that we had all the buy-ins already, that Mars Regional Agreement Amendment Group recommends, that DESE recommends through their regional schools group, were already there. So I felt really good about that. This vote tonight will actually start the process of truly amending our regional agreement to moving toward that point. They said, essentially you come up with your review of your regional agreements. You should have everyone who would have an investment have their buy-in ahead of time. Once the school committee makes a vote, that officially kind of starts the ball rolling. We'll submit to DESE for a preliminary review of the regional agreement as amended. Honestly, we're not making huge amendments here, so I don't anticipate having lots of findings coming back to us that we would then need to address. And then from here on down the road, it's a matter of kind of moving through the process to get us to potentially town meetings. That's the goal, is town meetings in the spring of 2020 next year. So this is the agreement as it came out of the October 10th meeting. We have had a verbal update from members of the Newbury Board of Selectmen, which was the only board that had not completed their board review of this separately, that they will not be requesting any changes at the meeting, the DCC meeting tomorrow night, which would be their first chance to come back to us. So I'm assuming that this kind of stands as it would be, having been reviewed by all the boards. I know a lot of you have been at the DCCs, or you've gone through this. Do you want to go through change by change? Or, I feel like we've done this on camera, we've done this with this group. I don't want to take any of your time if we've already kind of, not beaten this horse to death, but, if we've already gone there. Are there any big questions?
Can I make one clarification?
Oh,
Well,
gosh.
it was raised by Newbury,
Oh, they did raise something.
and it was, so on page 104,
Oh, yeah.
there's a section in red added text. It says, "An addendum to this agreement shall specify the process for the apportionment of the cost of specific district-wide capital projects such as a stadium renovation and maintenance." So that was added in to mirror the process we used for the stadium, right? So we said that's not a normal thing, right? This is not just the normal way to assess it. So if and when we have any special agreements or arrangements or capital projects, if it alters from the capital language that's in this agreement, we would attach it as an addendum. It's not attached as an addendum. We do have a separate documentation signed off that talks about how we, if we have more than 500,000, we would use a portion to pay down the assessments. So we have that all. That's what that speaks to. The Newbury, don't remember who, but someone mentioned that as a concern about feeling like they want to know what that addendum means. So we can clarify that tomorrow night, but that's what that speaks to. Just so you're all aware.
Thank you.
That's what I do.
Anything further? Can I get a motion to approve the regional agreement as amended and edited, please?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion?
I do have a couple of questions.
Yep, go for it, Dina.
Especially since Newbury hasn't told us themselves. Did you get any written communication from them as far as outside of this one piece you noted?
No, and I don't think we expected to, because we said they would come to the meeting at the DCC tomorrow night. With that information, we didn't receive anything in writing from either Salisbury or Newbury or Rowley either. I watched the meeting, so to get a sense of what the discussions were. There was definitely some concern about the alternative assessment and the landlord-tenant agreement, but it was made very clear that this does not include that language, that was struck, so that we're keeping all of that as is, with the hope, and I know there's further discussion around that we would get all three towns to the table to have the kind of a dual discussion about those two pieces.
I have some hesitation about voting on this tonight if we haven't had that conversation with them at the DCC. Now, granted, their attendance has been sporadic, both with when they attend and who attends that meeting, which is a little concerning and quite frankly, a little frustrating when you're not dealing with the same people. And within the board, there can be disagreements as to how they should move forward. So I'm a little concerned about voting on this tonight. I understand we want to move this forward so that we can get this to town meeting in the spring. But is there any harm in tabling this until December?
The only thing I can think of is I don't know how fast DESI will get us back a preliminary review. I can tell you I sent them an email on Sunday and have not heard back yet.
Good point.
Can I ask a question? What's the hesitation with voting, not having an official word? Because we don't have an official word other than the voice at the table from Rowley and Salisbury as well. So what's the harm in voting tonight? You're
Well-
voicing your opinion on whether you think this is,
Yeah, and honestly, we could literally not have had any discussion with our boards of selectmen. We could vote it through and we can start the process.
Right.
They highly recommend against that.
right. It's a-
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But we could do that.
So if you vote tonight in favor of it, and since we've been discussing it for 13
Years.
years now, I'm pretty sure you're in favor of it, the worst-case scenario is if it falls apart tomorrow night, nothing has to happen with that, other than you haven't approved, and we're going to choose to not move it forward. But given the fact that, you know, the discussion was very benign, there was that one concern about that confusion about the addendum, all were very much in support of this moving forward, because it's really, it's semantics changes.
Right, I understand that, but, all right.
Deb?
The way I understand it is that, sorry, is that what you just said, that this is starting the process, and we can't start the process until we vote on this. And it's not binding us
No,
to
move
anything.
forward.
Yeah, and-
They were saying, one of the specific points that they made during the session I attended was when you vote this, you are not opening the regional agreement.
Correct.
So the regional agreement is not open, effectively changed, until the town meeting votes in all three towns are complete. So even if one town votes it and the other two vote it down, it's not considered open, there are no changes made, nothing is done to the regional agreement until all three towns have voted it, and then it's considered opened and amended.
So it seems to me that it's in best interest of expediting this to vote on it tonight rather than to wait another month, since we have to begin. And so I would, did we make a motion yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I have a motion and a second on the table.
Okay.
We're in the more discussion
forgot.
phase. I hear you. Any further comments on that?
Can I ask one more question? So this is just to get this process started. Once everything is teased out and the towns have all agreed to the language in here before it goes to the towns, will we vote on this again
No,
for final approval?
no, I mean, we can always amend, we can essentially re-vote it if we want to make changes to it. So if we make, let's say that we hit January, right? And all of a sudden, someone says, oh my gosh, you forgot this thing that we've been doing since 2009, and it should really be included in there, because that's one of the reasons that DESI does strongly encourage you, is so that you keep up with your current practices, and if maybe there's something we overlooked in our 9 years of considering regional agreement amendments, we could always just re-vote that with new amendments. And presumably at that point, DESI would have already started their review, and we could just say to them, here's one more thing, rather than start from scratch with the changes that we'd like to see.
Would that start the DESI review process all over again?
I don't believe so. I got the idea from Christine Lynch that they're extremely flexible on helping that, on moving through that process, that it's not sort of linear. They were saying that with some districts, they're in, literally from the 7 years ago or 9 years ago, they could be in the process from that point. They actually encourage you to check back with DESI frequently during the process, which we haven't been doing, but I think that just means that it hasn't been, reviewed in bits and pieces. We'll be handing them sort of a bulk to review up front, and then we could work on bits and pieces afterwards if we need to. So, and I did have to laugh because there was a question about how long does a regional agreement review usually take? And they said, well, you know, sometimes it can take a matter of months, but often we'll see it take up to 2 years. Yes. So, all right. Any further questions, discussion? All right, all in favor? All right.
I'm gonna
One
abstain.
Abstention? Okay.
Can I vote on this? Come on, it's like 13 years.
Please, I want to see this pass too, but I do not want to, I want to do this the right way.
Oh,
I want
yes.
to make sure all parties are in agreement and dotting all i's, crossing all t's.
I voted for Dina. She abstained. I voted yes.
Brian took my vote.
There you go.
I don't want anybody out there to think that this is the wrong way.
Right.
Oh, it's,
Yeah, yeah.
This is not. I mean, this is the right way. This is the proper way to do it. So I just don't.
No.
3 towns have all worked on it.
exactly, Deb, and I'm not trying to say that I think this is the wrong way. I just would prefer that we had Newberry's input in here already in case they want to make changes. They're the wild card. I don't want people to think that we're, all of a sudden, yay, we're almost there, and something else happens, and they go, what happened? That's all.
I will say too, this all happens in the DCC, and there's nothing binding happening in the DCC. So they could literally come and say tomorrow that, you know, everything's fine, and then they could say in a month, you know, no, absolutely not.
Very true.
Because the DCC is not a, does not vote anything that's binding. So, you know, it's going to be a long process still, but we'll keep on it. And, you know, I think it's promising that we all agreed to look toward one specific set of town meeting dates to bring this in front of, the residents of the town for a vote. So, that's right. Oh, there we go. All right, moving on to the seal of biliteracy. Is that, oh, Kim! Kim gets to talk.
I get to talk.
She's
So
here.
excited.
She has no arms.
A lot to say, too. No, I'm just kidding. So last year, the state had made a move to offer up to districts the seal of biliteracy, and it is an award that recognizes students who have achieved proficiency in English as well as another language. And so this opportunity would be given to our graduating seniors, and they would have to prove that proficiency through 2 different ways. They would have to take the MCAS, which they have already taken as 10th graders, and score within a certain range, but they would also have to take a world language exam and score in the advanced category, in the upper advanced. So there are many states who actually already use this biliteracy seal. We are kind of slow to the party, if you would. I would also state that the Department of Ed is making more changes that are really positive about raising the awareness of the importance of having students study world languages and be proficient in more than just one, and then also celebrating and acknowledging that. So there is a process involved. It is not too complicated for the fact that we are a smaller district. For some of these larger districts who have jumped on this opportunity last year, they have struggled with scheduling of tests and who pays for the tests, which test do they take. It's obviously open to everybody. As we met with the world language teachers here and the principal, there's probably about, I would say, 4 students right now who would be eligible to take. I mean, anybody can take the exam, but there are probably four that would potentially pass. And so if they do meet the 2 criteria marks there, then we report that to the state. The state then sends us the seal, which then will get put on their diploma. So our hope is that you will vote in favor of moving forward with this action so that our students can be recognized for this honor. I also think this is a great opportunity to put some life back into the world languages. The hope would be that students would be able to accelerate their language learning much earlier so that one of the assessments that the students could have taken is the AP exam, But the problem with the AP exam, they don't get the results till after graduation, so they would not honor that. Now, that doesn't mean that for some schools that's a problem, because some of those kids are able to take that AP exam as juniors. But we are slow as far as getting our students enrolled in some world language programs. So again, it's really an opportunity to also bring some attention to an area that has not had a lot of attention, and to celebrate the diversity of our students. So are there any questions about the process or the seal itself?
Questions for Kim? Dina?
Kim, you had mentioned that there could be a cost for
Yep.
taking this exam.
Yep.
Do you know what the cost is?
It's $18 per student. So this year, we haven't made the final decision, but for the most part, I would say we'd ask the students to cover that cost. But in some districts, you can use Title II grants, you can use Title I grants, where they pay for all of the kids who are eligible. So that is something that that would be a good problem to have if we had a lot of students who were taking that maybe that is something that we could put in through grants, so.
I think this is a great idea, and I hope it does spark
Yep.
world languages again,
Yep.
so that we start teaching them in elementary schools.
Yeah, and they are changing, the Department of Ed is changing, it's still called foreign language. They are changing it to world language, so you will see that change as well within the program here. And there are new standards that should be released by next year that are all proficiency-based. So I'm really excited about some of the new initiatives and the updating of what has needed some updating for a long time.
Linda?
What is the criteria again?
I'm sorry, what?
What is the criteria again?
So the criteria, it's on this front sheet, which is page 114. So they have to demonstrate a high level of proficiency in English by satisfying one of the following. So either earn a score of 240 or higher on the grade 10 legacy ELA, or with a newer one, it's a score of 220 on the ELA MCAS. Or, I'm sorry, 455 on the next gen MCAS. So they have to meet one of those benchmarks depending on which assessment their class took. And then the other one, we're looking at either adopting the STAMP or the Apple assessment, which are both ones that are approved by the state in order to meet the criteria. And those assessments are all done online, which we do have, and they're done on Chromebooks. It takes about 3 to 4 hours to complete. We have one of the world language teachers who is willing to go through the training and be the proctor for that. Trying to think. Oh, and the results come within 2 weeks, a week or two. Yeah, it's really fast. And they can always retake a certain part of those assessments as well if they don't pass in all the domains, so.
So all the students take it, and then,
So, I mean, obviously, all the students take the MCAS, but the ones who have had at least 2 years of world language, or who feel that they have, or it might not even be, they might have a home language, and they're certainly welcome and encouraged to take it as well. So we're not going to exclude anybody for taking the assessment, but there are certain factors that come into play that would make it more probable for passing.
thank you.
Kim, if a student that's a junior takes AP
Yep.
foreign language, can that count?
Yes.
It can?
Yes,
Okay.
because they'll get the results in time.
Right.
Aaron?
Can you test in more than one world language?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, you can, actually.
Is that an additional fee?
It is additional fee, yep. So that you can have 3, I mean, they can do as many as they want, I guess. If
Do you
they-
get multiple seals?
Yeah, I don't know if it's multiple
it's a
seals, but
single
you still get one seal, but it just acknowledges the
seal is
fact
worth
that
more.
yeah. Yeah, you can have like badges, like.
Any further questions? I have 2. So what is a heritage language? Because I've never heard that before. I've heard native language. I've never heard of a
I
heritage
think I think it's the politically correct way, heritage language now, is what they
heritage
say.
language.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And do we have room for the seal on our diplomas as they exist today, or would this require a redesign?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I did talk to Megan to find out the timeline is when they need to know, but I can certainly find that out to see how big that is.
Thinking it would be awkward if we got
Yeah,
seals.
we got the
and-
seal.
There's no name left.
Yes.
Thanks
Just a
for-
big seal.
Yeah.
That would, yeah, that's a good question. I will find out that.
Something on the front to say "See sale" on back.
Yeah. Attached.
All right, any further questions? No? All right, can I get a vote to approve the implementation of the Massachusetts Seal of Biliteracy, starting with the Triton class of 2020, please?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay. I think Maureen got her second in quite under the wire. Any further questions? All right, all in favor? All right, unanimous. And moving on to subcommittee reports and action items, policy and advocacy. Linda.
Okay, we had our meeting before this meeting, and we, being Narissa and I, had a meeting with some people down in the conference about starting to have the conversation about low declining classes. Enrollment. And, I know, and charter schools, so that we can change the way people think about declining enrollment. Because most people think if you have a declining enrollment, you can get rid of teachers, get rid of resources, and we know that's not true. So we're starting to have advocacy to start having people talk to their legislators to change the language. So I'm going to be writing a email and sending them to the people who we've spoke to down the conference, and hopefully that list gets bigger and we can start changing the way people think about things like that. And I think that's all that we spoke about. Other than for the regional agreement, we probably should have some, with the towns, having open forums to have conversations about the changes in the regional agreement so that everybody understands it before we go to town meetings. So we're going to be setting up meetings with the towns closer to each of their town meetings so that it will be fresh in people's minds. So other than that, that's all we've spoken about.
And you are canceling your December meeting, right?
Yes, because it happens to be the night that there's a SES musical, the concert. Sorry, it's 9 o'clock. So we canceled it for December as a Christmas present to ourselves. And we'll take it back up in January.
Wow. Okay. Any questions for Linda? No. All right. Deb, Finance Subcommittee?
Michelle covered most of the finance subcommittee meeting tonight, I think almost all of it. So there's no need for me to repeat that. We did have a chance to meet David Jack at the meeting, and I was very impressed with his enthusiasm and his sincere interest in what we were doing. And we're meeting next Wednesday.
All right. And Paul texted his apologies this morning. He is traveling out of state and could not be here tonight. So he asked Dina if she would take on updates for PNN.
No, actually what Paul did was sent us a picture, a very lovely picture of the Maine woods, and said that he would be with the deer and not us. So anyway, yes, he did leave me to do the report.
He said this is it, and he's back on schedule after this, so.
I don't blame him. It looked beautiful.
It did
so.
look beautiful.
Anyway, we are meeting with the TRTA and for negotiations. Our next meeting is December 3rd. That's all we can say about that topic. But the other piece, in our packets, we have this large piece of paper that is the superintendent evaluation questions that we used last time. Over the summer, I said to Brian that I would take a stab at trying to line up these questions. As you know, last year we did the survey instead of the other rubric-based, well, this is rubric-based, but the other evaluation form that the state used, we piloted this instead. So what I did this summer is looked at all these questions and tried to tie them to the standard and one of the indicators within the standard. And then I met with the superintendent, and we kind of went through all of those again, because we found that a lot of these could be pinned to a couple different indicators. So I tried to do what I thought was the best one, and we found that we were heavier in some areas than others, and that we needed to possibly add some other questions. So at the end of this document, you'll see the ones in blue. Those are the ones that we added, and what I had done is I had gone back to some of the older evaluation forms that we had used for the superintendent evaluation and pulled those. And we, within PNN, we kind of looked at all of those and reworded some of them and made sure that we thought that these fit to these right indicators. So we are presenting it tonight as a first reading so that everybody can kind of look at it and see if this is the way we want to go. And if so, adopt this in the next couple of months so that we have this ready to go long before we have to evaluate the superintendent, because Lord knows we're going to have a lot of other things to contend with between now and then. Any questions on this? Or Maureen, did you have anything to add?
No, I think you did a nice job capturing what we discussed. Thank you.
A lot of work, Dina. It's impressive.
Yeah, but it's, I think.
Thorough.
I think I think it's lined up nicely. And as I said to Brian when we met, I took this, we, in our discussion, when he and I met, we had some discussion on some of these questions, and we kind of looked at it from different angles, and I said, looking at it from a school committee perspective gives it, that's why there were some information or some areas that I think that, well, Brian agreed that we needed to kind of shore up a little bit. Did you want to add anything?
I do not.
Okay. Any other comments? Can I get a motion to approve the revised superintendent evaluation tool, now updated to better align with the updated Mass DESI rubric, as a first reading, please?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right. Unanimous approval. There is no correspondence in the packet. Can I get a motion to adjourn with our next meeting on December 11th, 2019 in the high school library at 7 p.m., please?
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you all.